Hi, this is Miss Litton, and this is Chapter 15 review, Darwin and Evolution. So for Darwin, some key things that you're going to want to know is a little bit about his journey, the trip that he made. And we talked about, this page kind of did some of the summary of things that he learned about comparing different environments, looking at seashells, looking at the Galapagos finches and how they use different tools. It looked like it came from an ancestral finch. Looked at the marine iguanas. They're only found here. What do you call those if they're only found in one place? Endemic. He looked and compared the differences between rainforests and desert landscapes and looked to see what organisms were there. And that would be what kind of evidence for evolution? Yeah, biogeographical. Perfect. Okay. He looked at different organisms. He thought about common ancestor, that they looked similarly. What would it be if they had a common ancestor and they traveled along the same path and evolved into the same endpoint? What would you call that? Parallel. Not closely related, end up at the same point. Convergent evolution. Good. We then went through just a quick history. Linnaeus, we need to know binomial nomenclature. Okay? He still believed in fixity of species. Later, he thought change over time. We looked at Leclerc, and the way I remember that is you would have to have a really good clerk to keep track of all those plants and animals. He made a 44-volume history of everything he'd seen, and he said there was descent with modification. He had overwhelming evidence to see that descent with modification. We then saw Darwin's grandfather, a physician and a naturalist, and he, as a physician, he looked at animal development, he looked at artificial selection going on with, let's say, dogs or pigeons. He looked at vestigial organs, and he also thought there was common descent. Cuvier, I think that the bones have to be cuveyed with dirt. He was the father of paleontology. He did not think that there was change over time. He believed in catastrophism. He said it looks like it's change over time, but really they're just these major catastrophes wiping out a bunch of species, and that's why it looks like change. And then Lamarck. He did think there was descent with modification. He just had the wrong mechanism. His mechanism was the theory of acquired characteristics, of use and disuse. And he said, if you stretch that neck, your neck will be longer and your offspring's neck will be longer, and so forth. He just had the wrong mechanism. So when we studied, these are some scientists coming before him. Then while he was traveling, Darwin was reading a book by Charles Lyell about principles of geology. And the main thing there is that the Earth was old. The Earth was very, very old. And that's critical to Darwin's theory of natural selection because you have to have a lot of time, right? If the best adapted traits are moving forward, you have to have a lot of time to see those changes. There was also this idea that of struggle to live, right? And you can look at it economically, but he took it and applied it to biology and said there is a struggle to live. Do you want to take the practice?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's log in as how many hours of homework you think you have tonight. I'm going to pause you for a minute. Okay, here we go with questions. Good job. 44-volume history. Again, these are not like, can you explain this to me? You either know it or you don't know it. Binomial nomenclature was Linnaeus. Lamarck. Erasmus Darwin. Cuvier. Why is somebody missing this? Could you not chat in the background? It's driving me nuts. Darwin went on the Beagle, people. Darwin. That was the name of his boat. All right. So then we went a little bit more about Darwin. We looked at change over time, whether it be land or biological. He looked at seashells. That were high up, not seashells like on the sand, but up in the mountains, right? He looked at biogeography. He compared desert areas to lush rainforest and what kind of organisms were growing there. He looked at fossils and said, man, These fossils look like the sloth that's living today, or the armadillo. He looked at things that were kind of an amalgamation of different organisms and wondered, is this endemic just to this area? He looked at the tortoises, and he saw that they were very specific shells, the neck and the shell shape, depending on what they had to eat there. So he would say, his argument would be, and again, I'm not criticizing any belief, but he would say, did God on this island create one that had a shell that arched up and this one was flat? Did he create them both on the same one and one lived and one died? How did that work? And the idea was that those that had the shell that was best adapted to that particular environment are the ones that survived and reproduced. He looked at organisms that were endemic to that particular area. He looked at the specialization of finches. He compared the different islands and how many finches they had on each island, depending on how much competition that they had on that island. And he wrote a book. He didn't publish it, but he wrote the manuscript for a book, but he was nervous to publish it. He didn't publish till years later, after the same theory idea was brought up by a man named Wallace. And Wallace is the one who coined the phrase survival of the fittest while battling malaria. And they co-published at that time, but Darwin had years of evidence that he had been collecting all along. Wallace also did the Wallace Line. It makes each of these regions like their own particular island. They're either cut off by small land or island, land bridges, or really high mountains would cut them off, or they're actually an island. And so they would have real specific organisms to that area. So Darwin's theory, or natural selection, his mechanism for the theory of evolution, assumes that you have variations amongst your individuals. It doesn't work unless there are variations, right? It doesn't list unless there are variations amongst them. And that some of those variations, they have to be heritable variations. It has to be in your DNA. It can't be something you acquired during your lifetime. You were born with it in your DNA, a tendency towards that at least. And then those that are best adapted are the ones that are going to be the most fit. And remember, to be fit is to be able to pass on your what? Genes. And that you have vast amounts of time to contribute to accentuate that particular trait. Did you have a nice birthday, sweetheart?
I did. Thank you for asking. I left my...
No problem. And then we talked about different adaptations. It's a trait that helps in...
See you tomorrow.
Bye. Have fun tonight.
Thank you.
Okay. That helps an organism to be better suited to its environment. We've already just talked about convergent evolution. You're not related, but it looks like. What would be the type of structure that looks like convergent evolution? Analogous structures. Analogous structures. Now, if we talk about wings, some wings would be analogous. Give me an example of analogous wings. Tell me, I don't care. Bat and butterfly. Okay, bat and butterfly would be analogous only, right? Because they just fly. Give me wings that would be homologous as well. Bat and bird, because they have humerus, radius, ulnar, carpals, metacarpals, phalanges. Yes? Okay. We looked at artificial selection, when man breeds and chooses what traits should be passed on. We looked at when man does descent with modifications artificially by how we exploit different aspects of the plant, which seeds we plant. Parallel evolution is when you see these similar types of mammals that are marsupials versus placentals. Okay, then we went into evidence for evolution. We looked at fossils, and we said if you want to be a fossil, how old do you have to be? And you can see descent with modification over time. What do you call those fossils that are in between what we now classify as a reptile or a bird? Transitional fossils, and they're there as well. And does it have to actually be the bones of an organism?
No, it can be no footprint.
Yeah, footprint, seeds, something left behind. And so we looked at some different transitional fossils. We looked at the horse as a good example of descent with modification, because as the continent shifted around, then you saw Then you saw the horse getting bigger and bigger as it shifted from a forest-like setting into a prairie-like setting. We revisited the other piece of evidence, biogeographical. We looked at that again. We looked at endemic organisms. Anatomical evidence. Before I show you the slide, there were 3 subsets to anatomical evidence. Don't say them out loud. Think them in your head. See if you can remember the 3 subsets to anatomical evidence.
I got him.
You got them?
Yeah.
Sweet. Do you remember if you're going to give me the letters in order that I presented them, could you do that?
Yes.
What was the first letter you would give me?
H.
H. What is the next letter you would give me?
V.
V. What's the next one you would give me?
D.
Embryological or developmental, is that what you went with?
Yeah.
Okay. So anatomical, you look at homologous structures, not analogous. Vestigial structures are structures that point to your ancestral past, like a withered eye or a hip or a femur or something like that. And then embryological structures are you're comparing embryos. Now you can compare them as they are anatomically, but you can also look at the control mechanisms, and that's the developmental piece of evidence. That was the last piece I gave you, not necessarily under anatomical, but developmental was looking at Hox genes and the control for segmentation, if you remember that. Okay, next piece of evidence we looked at was biochemical. This is looking at DNA, ATP, enzymes, looking at sequence of amino acids in proteins, and you're assuming the more similarity you have in the sequencing, the more closely you are related. The more mutations you have between each other, the more distantly you're related. Here are those Hox genes we talked about. And these are control regions that are found, a same pattern, the same genes in all these different species. And then that was the end of that. And then here was a question or two. Pause you. Okay, you ready?
Yay!
Yay! Delay of game. Yay! 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 Woo! Good job. Best way to get ready for a multiple choice quiz is to take
Multiple choice quiz.
right. Where would be one good source of information for that? End of the chapter. End of the chapter. Now, you're still talking. What you want to do is take it like a test. Create that same environment that you have during a quiz. Give yourself, like, you can kind of guess how many minutes I give you for a quiz. Look at how many questions are at the end of that chapter. Give yourself like, okay, I'm going to give myself 15 minutes, or I'm going to give myself 20 minutes. Write each question, write each answer. Commit to it. Okay? I personally would just do all the odds. I just do it cold. I wouldn't study another nanosecond. I just go home and do that cold. And then I would go and grade and see what percentage I got. And go, would I be happy with that? If I am, I'm done. I'm going to move on to my English essays. Okay? Paragraph. My bad. Okay? Come back to me. If I get anything less than what I want on that quiz, then I go back, I reread the group shared notes, maybe I look at a Bozeman, maybe I read the summary at the end, maybe I skim through and look at all the pictures of the book, get some more input. Then I go back, and this time I don't take the odds, what do I take?
The evens.
The evens. If I'm still struggling, I go study some more and I take them all again, right? That's what you need to do. Be precision. Be precision. I want you to
Secure the
secure the victory royale. That's what I want you to do. Secure the victory royale. I wrote it down. Okay, make the choices. I love you. Hasta la vista. What? Yeah. No, I don't. Have a piece of toast.